Okay, welcome everyone to the Modeling Symposium 2018 at EclipseCon. A few words of introduction before I hand over to the first speaker, but I keep it short. So in case you never attended a modeling symposium, this has a long tradition at EclipseCons. Background is that the modeling ecosystem at Eclipse has always been one of the biggest and most vibrant communities, and we don't have enough slots at EclipseCon to fit in all the talks which get submitted. So that's why we created the modeling symposium, to have more slots, shorter slots, available for smaller topics, which are still very interesting. So we have 3 talks today, 10 minutes each. 3 interesting topics, one by Simon, one by Merks himself, and one by Velu, who traveled from India here, so I think probably the longest travel. So I'm looking very forward to those topics. For the speakers, I kindly ask you 2 things, or several things, more than 3. Please use this mic. Please stay in 10 minutes, including questions, and when you are done with your talk and take questions, please already unplug your machine so the next speaker can already plug in, so we don't lose any time. And again, please stay in the 10 minutes, otherwise we don't have enough time. For the audience, one more thing I would like to ask you. When you evaluate this session, so please evaluate it, the +1, 0, -1 is about the idea of the modeling symposium in general. Please don't use that vote for rating the talks, because that doesn't make much sense. If you want to give feedback to one of the talks, please use the comment field, and I will forward those comments to the speakers. So I make sure that your feedback gets to the appropriate speaker. And besides that, without further ado, I leave it up to the speakers to introduce themselves and their topic, and I'm looking forward to 3 interesting lightning talks. So let's get started.
Okay, hello everybody. My name is Simon Schwichtenberg. I'm a PhD student of the Paderborn University, and today I'm going to present CrossEco. So CrossEco is a modeling framework that allows you to generate Java, C#, TypeScript code, and Swift code from your eCore models that are supplemented with OCL. And the main motivation behind this is that today software often targets multiple platforms, and these different platforms use different programming languages, and CrossEco allows you to bring some of the EMF technology to these different platforms. And this includes features that are known from the Eclipse modeling framework, like persistence, notifications, reflection, referential integrity, so this E-opposite thing, validation, and the object constraint language. So in the following, I want to present a showcase and to show CrossEco in action. And the source code of the showcase is available on GitHub, so you can access this via crosseco.org. And CrossEco can do a lot more than I am going to show in this showcase. Regarding the EMF features, I will focus on persistence, notifications, and the object constraint language. I've integrated CrossEco with different persistence technologies like CouchDB, PouchDB, Couchbase, MySQL, and XMI. Today I'm focusing on CouchDB. That's JSON-based, document-based NoSQL database. And PouchDB is also a document database that synchronizes with CouchDB, but it synchronizes the data locally in your browser or web view, so that you can access the database from your local browser. So this is especially useful for offline scenarios where you have where you want to have access to your data within your web view. CrossEco was also integrated with several frameworks like Angular, Tabris, Apache Cordova, and Xamarin. Today I show 2 apps, the Angular web application that runs in the web browser, and the Tabris app that is a hybrid web app. So you can write your applications in TypeScript, but you can use native UI controls with tables. And yeah. Okay. So the model that I'm using captures the domain of conference organizations. So this model has a class conference, organizations, persons, talks, tracks, venues, rooms. And I do not want to go into details, it's just a demo, but I want to highlight two things. And the first one is that a person can make up its own schedule for talks. So I can create my personal schedule for talks. And another thing is that there's one blue line or arrow here, and this indicates a derived expression that is calculated by a calculation rule that's defined by in OCL. And yeah, you should remember that because later on I will get back to that. Okay, now I will go to the live demo. And for this purpose, I will open the web browser, and here, this is the Angular app. And on top of this Angular app, we have a filter for all the different tracks. And here is a list of talks. And with this plus button, I can add talks to my personal schedule. And as I said before, we are focusing on document-based database CouchDB, and this is shown in this tab here. So this is my actual model that I'm using. It models the EclipseCon conference. For example, I can randomly pick one of the documents, and then what I've selected one organization, and the name is Head Crashing Informatics. Okay, so this is all my data. I go back to my my app. Then I will open the debugger. Is it okay, or should I? Okay, so now I will refresh to show what happens in the background on boot up. So the first thing that happens is that I will set up a synchronization with a local database that's called EclipseCon that runs in my web view or in my browser. And then we have another remote instance, it's the CouchDB, and these two databases are synchronized in the background. One step forward. And what happens here is that I iterate over all documents that are in this database, and I load e-objects from the JSON documents. That's what's happened here in this JSON resource from JSON. It takes in a JSON document and returns an e-object. And this e-object provides the functionality that is usually known from Eclipse modeling framework. Okay. And another thing is that I create a listener for model changes. So that will react on when the user that's using this app adds talks to his personal schedule. It will fire a notification so that we can react to this change. So far, this was the setup. And now I select one of these tracks here, for example, Cloud Native Java. And now I call one of the operations here in my controller, and this filters the list of talks according to this track. And what's special about this is that this talks attribute is actually derived by an OCL expression. So when I go into this function, here we see the original OCL expression and the expression in TypeScript that was transcompiled from the OCL expression. So that we can execute our OCL expressions in TypeScript. Okay, now I will I will show you, for example, the current users of the Angular app. So there are two users, and there's not much data currently for these documents. And now I'm going to add one of the talks to my list of personal schedule. And now my notifier that I've registered before fires, and I can access the data from this notification like usually in the EMF Java world. So I can access, for example, the e-structural feature that was assigned for this change. So this would be the attending attribute or e-reference. And I can access the event type for insertions or for removals. I can access the new value. And then this change is propagated to the document database for persistence. And yeah, for this purpose, the e-object is serialized back into JSON and put into my local database that automatically synchronizes with the remote CouchDB. So if I refresh this thing here, I see that this list here changed, and my personal talk was persisted here in this document. This is a reference to the talk that I'm attending. Okay, then I will show a little bit of the Tabris app. So that's basically the same. It's not that fancy, but it just shows the power of CrossEco. Here's a picker where I can select for some talks, and I can also select and add these talks that I'm going to attend to my personal schedule, and then we can go back to the database, and then it shows that there are several talks added to my personal schedule. So that's all about this showcase I'm going to show today. And now I'm happy to answer your questions. Thank you. So the question was if this TypeScript code was generated from Ecore, and the answer is yes. So CrossEco comes with code generators for all the languages that I was presenting, for TypeScript, Swift, and these ones. Yeah. There was another question in the back. Yeah. Yes. So the OCL compiler traverses the OCL expressions and maps it to native expressions of the target language.
Okay, somehow Jonas coerced me into doing this, so I'm doing a quick talk, but I think we're already behind schedule, so I'll try to pull the part of the schedule in. So I wanted to upfront thank the folks at Airbus. My colleagues and I from Itemis have been working for them for several months, and they were kind enough on short notice to say I can demo this stuff to you. I thought they would say no, especially there's a lot of data that they're using here. These folks in specifically are located in Friedrichshafen here in Germany, and their group is doing a lot of deployment of satellites and all that kind of stuff. So they have a rather sort of funky UI. So if you look at the sort of Explorer, this is really just the common navigator that they've specialized to show things in a special way. So this really is just an Eclipse workspace, but they've decorated the folders in special ways and yeah, made it look kind of funky. Their model is very large, so I opened there. This is sort of the editor that they wrote before we started. So you look at the new child is grouped into a lot of groups, and if you look at just some of the groups, there are a lot of things in those groups. So there are a lot of classes. It is a very large, complicated model. So not only is the model big, but there's lots of instances of each of these things as well. So it's a lot of data and complexity to manage. So they wanted us to prototype a sort of simpler approach. And a lot of their engineers, the people that are entering this data, they're kind of Excel spreadsheet junkies. They're just used to, like, spreadsheets are their sort of data model of choice. So they wanted a user interface that had more of a spreadsheet type of feel to it. So if you look at some of the kinds of things we did here, I've specialized the normal multi-page editor with the tabs so that they support tab groups, because you have to think each of these concrete classes they create is its own page, and so they have a heck of a lot of pages. There's a control that lets you choose which pages you want open. If I expand all this, you can see there are really a lot of pages. I can flatten this view out so it shows just the concrete classes, but there's just a lot of stuff. And if you open all these pages, there's just way too many tabs to try to scroll through and manage. So we have this sort of grouping of them into their logical, what they call aspects. I was also kind of sick of all the sort of Eclipse, the sort of Windows dialogues with their fat trimmings and all that around them. I wanted controls that looked a little bit more like drop-down combo boxes. So we have a lot of these things create these nice controls that are actually shells, and they are things that you can maximize and minimize, and they have a resize capability, but they're nice and sleek looking, look like a drop-down combo box. And instead of the big fat OK and cancel buttons, we have the little X for cancel and check mark for OK. And we have a lot of fancy things in here. Of course, the kind of things you'd expect, check all and uncheck all. This particular resource that I have open is actually a whole bunch of resources. So we've not just opened up a single file, but quite a few, and we can filter the views based on the actual files involved. So we have a large control for filtering this. So I sort of feel sorry for the users that end up using this, because I don't know how they manage all this complexity, but apparently they can. Also in all of the views, we have various controls. So with tables, it's often a pain that they don't fit, and you make the window different sizes. So we have things like this autofill mode. So if I maximize this, the columns always fit. There's never a left-right scroll bar. There's also a packing mode that everything in each column is fully visible. And another sort of spreadsheet-like option is to be able to do filtering. So the drop-down shows all of the values, and I can deselect them all and say I'm only interested in showing these particular values, and the view filters down. So much like what you'd expect in a spreadsheet. And if you had a lot of columns, there's a single control where you can say, turn my filtering off, and I don't want anybody to be sorted. And of course, the kind of things you'd expect, that I can filter things and sort them alphabetically. They also have these sort of concepts of mapping. So what I'm showing here specifically is the mapping editor, but we also have I think it was the interfaces that had a lot of interesting graphics associated with them. So we also have this graph view that shows, so in this case, there are all these components that they're hooking up with wires and have these relationships. So we're able to graphically visualize the relationships between all those components. This part is using Zest with an elk layout, so it does really quite a good job of creating a nice layout. We can do it either up and down or side to side. So just a lot of funky controls. Another control we have is on some of the things like the connectors. They have a bunch of contacts on them. So on the hover, you can see the full view, but we also can open a little information browser that's sensitive to the cell selection so that you can get an overview of what might actually be quite a long list. And this dialog is actually a dialog that's dockable. So you can dock it to something and it will follow the place that you dock it to, and it can float around freely as well. It's a non-modal dialog that stays wherever you put it. I'm trying to think, are there any other? Oh, the other nice thing is this, what do you call it, breadcrumbs. This is exactly just reusing what JDT has for its breadcrumbs. Am I going overtime already? Then, yeah, it's cool. When I looked at, if you look at the context of their objects, there's really a large number of resources involved. And when you select some object, you really don't know where it's coming from without that contextual information. So this breadcrumbs view really tells you what project it's in and what configuration it's in and so on. And this is literally just reusing what JDT has. JDT's breadcrumbs is driven by content providers, so we just plugged our own content provider in and completely reused their functionality. Okay, it's internal and I'm a horrible API violator, but it does the trick. I mean, the alternative would have been to copy their code. That really wouldn't have been a big advantage. Anything else funky? Yeah, there's a lot of complexity here. I mean, just supporting all of the sort of, you see there's little man icon, all these layouts and which order the columns in. I can drag and drop these things and rearrange them so the user can really configure this view to show only the things they want. There are a lot of columns that I can show, but I don't know how the user deal with views that have this much information in them. So they can configure and tailor all this. And the other sort of technical problem for me was these people are always changing their models. They always come back next week and they have yet another model. And so everything that I built here is built just using EMF reflection. So when I create one of these pages, all I give it is the name of like the E-class itself, and I give information about which features to show, and I generate the information for creating the pages by analyzing their model. I literally walk through the entire package registry and look at all the models and figure out what design patterns they're using for their models to generate all of this stuff. So I have no hard-coded implementations that rely on the specific classes that I'm showing, but rather using patterns. And that way next week when they come with yet another revision of their model, the editor just works, and so they're happy campers. I'm sure I've exceeded my time now, so I will unplug and I will answer questions. And if you want help, our team will make cool UIs like this for you too. No, but I mean a lot of the patterns that I used here are, yeah, they're just straightforward things. They're in my head and they're not so concerned that this is proprietary code. And yes. It's a Nebula grid widget, Nebula grid and Nebula tree. It's pretty cool, but there's some aspects of it that I don't like. And when I design this stuff, there's a flag that I can switch things to just use table and tree. So I made sure the framework I built works for table, tree, and grid, tree, and grid table. Because I'm not a big fan of the grid, but they love it, so whatever, they can have what they want. Okay, thank you.
Okay, let me introduce myself. So I am Kulangi Velu Sanmugam. You can call me Velu if it is difficult to pronunciate my name. Okay. So I am from the Robert Bosch Engineering Business Solution Private Limited, India. I am from the tooling department. We are actually providing the tooling solution for the ECU software development. So here I would like to explain one of our use case. We done it for the external customers, BMW, which is about a software adapter. So here in this session answers about what is software adapter in the ECU software development, and why it is required, and how do we develop the software adapter with Eclipse DSL frameworks. So here I am going to show my slides now. So you know about ECUs. In the latest cars we have lots of ECUs. I mean about 50 to 100 ECUs. You know that what ECU does. And these ECUs are developed on some standards. Earlier we were using the Assam standard for ECU software development. Now we are using the AutoSAR. So to migrate from the AutoSAR to Assam standard, it is not like a easy effort. It will be taking a huge effort. It almost take a decade. And so until the ECU software migrated to that latest standard called AutoSAR standard, we need an adapter. So adapter, when I say the adapter, it sits in between the incompatible device, it makes the communication through. So here we are using the adapter until the whole ECU software migrated to the AutoSAR standard. Okay, so now I am going to show how to develop an adapter with the Eclipse DSL framework. Okay, here if you look at this example, so I have a component in the legacy standard, I have a component in the AutoSAR standard. So I want to communicate the component. The component is nothing but a functions with input-output arguments. Okay, just assume that it is a function with input-output arguments, and it sends some data from one standard to other standard. It cannot be done in a direct way, so we need some adapter in between required, and which receives the data and pushes the data through some functions called a runnable. So I can show you in detail about how the data from one standard to other standard, I mean component of one standard to other standard is flowing. So here I have an example called Assam. So I have a component called comb-func-x. It is sending the data like comb v engine to AutoSAR component through mixed mode component, which is nothing but adapter component. Okay, so this mixed mode component receives the data through the so here I mentioned that XIM, so it's nothing but an import and export interface, so which is sending the data through the export interface. In the adapter component, I receive the data through the import interface, and I'm pushing the data from adapter component to the AutoSAR component through ports. Here we used to say the ports. Ports is nothing but input and output, provider and receiver port. Provider port is nothing but a output data, and receiver port is nothing but input data. Here in Assam standard, we say the export and import. Export means exporting the data, means sending out the data from the component, and import means you are receiving the data from the device. So here the flow, through this way we are achieving the adapter. So you can, if you look at this example, so here from the Assam functions, I am just forwarding the value of the variable called comb v engine. So this function is being scheduled on the particular task, and so when the task triggers this function, it assigns this value, and the other function is scheduled also in the same task. And this is nothing but adapter function which is created by the software adapter. Here I am just getting the data of this variable and just pushing this data to this the buffer, which is nothing but a buffer which holds the data, and from the AutoSAR function I am receiving the data. So here the flow happens from message flow happens from Assam standard to AutoSAR standard, and from AutoSAR to Assam's, so the message happen from message flow happen from the AutoSAR function to Assam functions. through this way. So how do we design the adapter with Xtext framework? First, we derive the software adapter meta model from the existing meta model, ASAM meta model and AutoSAR meta model, then define the model entities which are required for the code generations, and then we derive the, we generate the Xtext grammar from the defined model entities, and then finally we create the DSL from this Xtext, then finally we do the code generations. So this is the flow. So when you design an adapter with Xtext framework, so here if you look at these slides, so here I will derive the model from the ASAM meta model and AutoSAR meta model, and then I derive the software adapter meta model. So usually Xtext, we derive the echo from the Xtext grammar, but I did it in vice versa, other way around. And now I define the model entities which are required for the code generations. So I defined components, ports, and variables which are used for the communications, and the connections. Connections is nothing but you just define the connection from which component to which component it has to be transferred, the message has to be transferred. So you have to define the model entities here, and we are going to, from the model entities, from the eCore, we are going to create the DSLs, Xtext grammar. It looks like that. And from the DSL, we are going to generate the output file which are required for the message communication. So here I am generating the files with using the extend expand script. Yeah, this is, we are doing it with our Xtext. So other way, we have one more framework is called Epsilon. It is purely for model-based applications, which supports model-to-model conversions and code generation from the model. So all the model-based solution, complete solutions, which provides a complete solution for the model-based applications. And here you don't need to define any DSLs. You have to derive the meta model from the AutoSAR and the MDX meta model. And from the meta model, you are going to create the rule. It's nothing but a ETL script. So using the ETL script, you are going to define adapter, means we are going to define that which component communicate to the which component, and just map the component using this epsilon DSL script. And from the DSL script, we are going to generate the output files. So here I'll show the demo. Okay, so this is the Xtext based language. Actually, I have defined one model language for the software adapter. Here I defined adapter name, and I defined the AutoSAR component, this component, and I defined the port, and I defined the variable. And this is for the different component, ASAM component. I define the component name and, component name and interface and variables. So then I configure the connections, how the connection has to be happen. So I just associate the runnable to these connections. From this meta model, I generate the code. From this language, I generate the code. It looks like that. This is the code I am generated from the DSL languages. This is I done with Xtext framework, and if I go to the Epsilon framework, this is the rule I defined. So using the rule, I just mapped the component of different standards, and I created the connection from the rule. I generated the code, XML file, and C file, and MDX file. Okay, any questions? You understand about what is software adapter model? Sir?
Extend for model to text transformation. Also, you use Epsilon.
Yes.
Okay, what are the frameworks you use? These two frameworks. You can also achieve everything with extend itself, right?
Yes, we can achieve the extend itself. Actually, extend you can generate the code from the model actually, but in Epsilon you can have additional features like loading and serialization of the things also there. So if you have a model, if you save the model, it will automatically load it into the file. So that things are happening. So Epsilon provides a complete solution for the model-based applications, and you can do whatever you want with a model. You understood with software adapter?
Thank you.
Thank you.
So thank you very much for attending the modeling symposium. Please remember to vote for the session. Please use the +1, 0 and -1 to rate the overall idea of the event. And please use the comment field if you want to give any feedback to the speaker. Please note that I will see it and I will forward that. So don't tell bad things about me in the comments. Anyway, I thank the speakers for coming. It was very interesting talks, and enjoy the evening. And if you have any open questions, I think all the speakers take them in the hallway over a beer or a wine. Thank you. Have a great evening.